Hello, good morning, buen dia, guten Abend. Thank you all for joining today's edition of our In-Service podcast. My name is Gerardo Pelayo. I'm the Vice President of Research and Advisory at Service Council. And boy, do we have a very fun, very interesting, very timely topic that we're going to be sharing with you today, titled The Micro Moments Behind the Frontline Experience. And to do the topic justice, I'm glad that we have Edwin Pahk with us. He's the Senior Vice President of Customer Success at Aquant. Edwin, thank you for joining us. We'll get to getting to know you a little bit more in just a second. And for the community, let me share why I'm so excited about this topic. Right now, we have our 2025 Voice of the Field Service Engineer research in market. This is our biggest research effort that we conduct year after year, over 10,000 data points. And as we were preparing for this conversation, one thing that stuck out is that 3 in 4 agents say that the technology that they need to be knowledgeable about in order to do their work has continued to increase. And that trend is relatively stable year over year. Where we see a decrease is that only 54% agree that the technology is making it easier to get their work done. Last year, that number was at 69%, not an insignificant drop. And the fact that just over half of technicians say, yes, technology is bringing a positive impact to my day-to-day work, it's something that should give us pause and ask ourselves, are we separating the possible, the exciting, the cool from the value? And not thinking just about adoption, but truly, are we adopting, are we transforming the service experience in the ways that matter most? Yes, to the customer, but also to those responsible for delivering that service experience, which is the frontline, particularly field service engineers in this case. And the timing is good as well. We're starting the second half of the year. It gives us time to take a step back and ask some of these questions. It's a good preamble for those of you who are going to be joining us in Chicago in September 8th through the 10th for our annual executive symposium. It's honestly the agenda. Even you see me stumbling with the voiceover there. It's humbling. So if you're on the fence of attending, forget about it. You should be there, absolutely. And to inform that conversation and help us move along, just some quick housekeeping. Today's podcast episode is going to be recorded as we always do and available in all the platforms that you know and love, in addition to our own resources, the website, the LinkedIn page, so you can share it with your colleagues, revisit some of the insights that I'm sure Edwin will be able to share with us from his experience. And last thing, to our listening audience on LinkedIn, we always like that you're a participating audience. So if you have any comments, you agree, you want to double click on anything that we're sharing, please do. We'll try to incorporate it in the conversation as we go along. So without further ado, Edwin, thank you again for joining us. I've had the pleasure of chatting with you and learning from your perspectives. But why don't you give the community an introduction to yourself and your role at Aquant?
Yeah, thanks so much, Gerardo. I really appreciate the time and the privilege to have this discussion with you. So to introduce myself to everyone, my name is Edwin Pahk. I lead customer success here at Aquant. Aquant is an AI company that's dedicated to solving service problems and field service problems in a variety of different contexts and use cases. I'm based out of here in Southern California. One of the few in the company that are out here. I've been with Aquant for about 6 years now, so been in this AI game for quite a bit before it actually became quite popular with, ChatGPT and a lot of these things bringing stuff to the forefront. And so, really, just a little bit about myself. I'm a pretty big LA sports guy since I did grow up here. So anything Dodgers, Lakers, you name it, even Rams football, and I've been a Californian guy for my entire life, so I'm not very good in different climates and weather and things like that. But generally, it's my role here at Aquant is to really oversee success and driving success for our customers as they go on. What we didn't really realize before, but we've come to appreciate more now, is really a transformation journey in how we leverage AI and how AI is really making an impact in the way that not only from a leadership standpoint, but all the way down to the individual end users and what that frontline experience looks like. So that's kind of what my team handles here at Aquant. But I'm very, very glad to be here. Super excited to be talking about this topic. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about me.
Oh, perfect, Edwin. And I'll actually use what you just mentioned as a segue to get the conversation started, because one of the open questions that we see out there is, how should we think about AI within the organization? Where does it fit within the strategy? Is it targeted at use cases? And we explicitly asked this question during our 2025 State of AI and Service Technology Research at the start of the year. Very interesting distribution of the results. 22% of the respondents said that AI is a core part of their service organization strategy. 31%, the biggest block, said that it's not core to their strategy, but it supports some specific business objectives. And the rest of them either said that they lack clarity on what the objectives are, or they are doing more talking rather than acting around AI. So this is clearly something that the community is still figuring out. What is the right way? Should we go waist deep? Should we deeper fit in the water? Based on your experience, what do you think is the right way to think and apply AI within the organization? Is it use cases or a more systemic approach?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's quite honestly an answer that's evolved over time for us, even here at Aquant, right? I think everyone can recognize the fact that being in service, you tend to be a little bit more risk averse in changing operations because you don't want to disrupt some of the things that you've already got going on today. But what I can tell you definitively through my experience with a lot of our customers is that the customers that are most successful in the approach of leveraging AI really spend a lot of time and thought and energy and mindfulness in really looking at it from a systemic approach, right? Because yes, of course, you can identify, and we do it all the time here as well at Aquant, of specific use cases like troubleshooting or resolving a problem and things like that, and dip your toe in the water in that regard. But by doing that, you're kind of missing the point of what AI is actually representing in the market today. The potential of which we have not seen the likes of in kind of a quantum leap of capability, thought process, change in the market that we probably haven't seen since the likes of social media's rise back in the mid aughts, and then even the internet's rise towards the late 90s, the rise of the personal computer. I actually put what's happening today in similar, if not greater, impact in the way that we perceive and interact with technology. And so that seems kind of scary. I totally get that. But I do think that there is something that if you're thinking about AI, it should be something that is thought of in a more holistic approach around how you can actually impact the entire experience of, let's say, that frontline worker as an example, not just a portion of it, if that makes sense. Because we know for a fact that specific use cases may pop up on your day, maybe 10, 20% of the time, when really there is potential here to create a vision for really changing the entire way that you work, but for the better, in ways that feel more natural and more towards what users really expect and how they do things today. So it's quite an interesting and fascinating kind of move when we talk about this. It can be daunting. I totally get it. But really, it is something that I think is actually possible now, right? Whereas you asked me 4 years ago, probably not, right? So that would be the reason for my thought process when it comes to this specifically. So if you haven't, there's no real harm in doing education, right? Educate yourselves on these things. Understand where and how these things can impact in a more systemic way. And I think you'll start to realize what that level of investment would look like. And quite honestly, it's already being reflected in the decision processes of a lot of our customers, where now AI decisions are not just sitting at the service leader level, it's going all the way top to the CEO, right? And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that later today. But yeah, that's kind of my advice or my thoughts when it comes to this.
Yeah, we will indeed, and there's a lot to unpack there. I'll confess that I lay a little bit of a trap there for you, because one of the things we tracked within that survey was the correlation to early outcomes from AI. And the good news is you passed. So the 22% that are seeing it as core to the strategy, very interestingly, all of them have seen some form of impact already from their efforts. Whereas the other 31%, where it's more use case focused, that correlation is 2 in 3 scenarios. So the data seems to support that thought process. And one place where I would like to go deeper is in what does it mean that the data is valuable and helpful? Because 29% of service leaders at the start of the year, the Service Leaders Agenda survey said that the inclusion of AI in the service ecosystem was a top focus area for them throughout the year. Probably that number has increased, to be honest, if we ask the question again right now. But where it gives us a little bit of pause in the in-market survey that I was talking about right now, and that's why I think it's so important to validate the strategic initiatives against what is being seen and perceived in the field, is that 41% of the technicians who have responded to this year's survey think that AI can be very helpful in their day-to-day. So they're optimistic, but it's not yet. And that is that separation of, I like it, I want it to be part of my day-to-day, but it's not helping me yet.
Yeah.
So how do you think the AI has changed this expectation of what helping a technician truly encompasses?
Yeah, it's fascinating because I can tell you, we are at Aquant, for the longest time have been very focused on the concept of closing the skills gap, right? And trying to help folks troubleshoot and solve problems better, right? And more quickly, like an expert would, right? What's fascinating is that on the back end of it is, yes, absolutely, that is true. But if you think about your survey responses as an example, I have no doubt a portion of those responses that responded saying, hey, it's like they see the potential, but it's not there yet. A lot of it comes from this idea and this concept of change management. I'll take resolution and troubleshooting as an example, right? As a technician that takes pride in the work that they do in solving these types of problems, we clearly see that there's a need to help coach individuals and people to understand that the AI is not there to just tell you what to do, right? Because there's a lot of assumptions that, oh, I already know better than any computer would ever tell me, right? This is typically a mindset that exists in quite a lot of folks, and I'm not disagreeing with them, by the way. There probably are things that an AI probably can get better at that subject matter experts already know, but that comes with this understanding of how to approach and use this technology in a way that betters yourself. And again, troubleshooting and these types of things are one thing, and that's something that Aquant has been focused on, in the early days. But now there are a lot more practical situations and moments, I guess you would say, that we are starting to see quite a lot of how AI can turn that can be very useful to actually being useful, right? And there are some very basic things. I think when you think about how technology helps, back to your first point about the fact that technology seems being helpful seems to be dropping. Well, I can hypothesize to a certain extent that part of it is probably because the proliferation of technology. Like nowadays, technicians having to go to 5 different apps or 5 different places to get their job done now, right? The tools in the tool belt when it comes to technology get more complex and more and are proliferated. And so basically what happens then, it becomes fatigue. There's a lot of fatigue there, right? But where AI can actually deliver practical value now is in basic operational things. Having one place to go to order a part, complete your work order, fill out your timesheet, not having to go to 3 different systems to be able to do that kind of thing. This is where the practicality of AI can start to transform that potential into real value. Because I can tell you, having done plenty of ride-alongs with a lot of technicians and a lot of our customers, a lot of the basic things, the pain points around how to, documenting things, having to go walk back up the stairs to get internet connectivity, to boot up the laptop. There are some very practical things that happen in a day-to-day technician's experience that AI can just make much more naturally happen, right? Like, and to really meet users where they are. So rather than users having to learn how to adopt technology, having the technology adapt to the user, right? And that's where I think a big potential for AI to really change that frontline experience comes from. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very very insightful. And one of the things I take away from that is also the shift from more transactional solutions to really understanding what makes up the overall experience. One
Yeah.
thing that behavioral economics, I'm not going to get too academic, but one thing it has taught us is that your experience, your perception at the end of an event is not the average of the individual perceptions every second,
Mm.
but there's some moments that really make an impact. There's the peak end theory, for example, that what happens at the very end and what happens at the climax of the overall speech, concert, you name it. So understanding what makes up that experience from the perception of a field service engineer and then the role that AI can have within that, it's definitely a shift that I think you were alluding to. So yeah, very very interesting. And you mentioned the CEO aspect of it as well, and that alters some of the dynamics, doesn't it? Particularly, we when we checked where is resistance for service leaders being mostly present within the C-level suite, the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and the CIO or CTO were the top two
Yeah.
sources of that. And I'd like to focus particularly on the second one. Of when AI becomes a CEO level initiative, what changes in terms of the role, the involvement of that CIO, and any perhaps lessons learned that you can share from your experience with the customers on best practices and pitfalls to avoid in that relationship.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's again fascinating to see the buying behavior and from our customers and from a lot of the folks that we talk to that has changed really in the last, couple of years, if that, maybe even in the last year. And really what it comes down to is, AI is now become a very big part of the mainstream when it wasn't even back in 2022. It was around, but it wasn't. And now that it's in the mainstream, you have Fortune 500 CEOs that have to mention AI in their quarterly reports. And what are they doing with AI, right? That then trickles down into other leaders at other companies that are now asking, hey, how can we incorporate AI? Not really thinking about it from like specific use cases and specific value drivers and things like this, but more holistically as a company. So then what happens then is of course, that brings in the CIO and the CTO because they need to be the most knowledgeable, to the CEO around like AI and its use. So then what's happening is this basically, as you speak to service leaders now that maybe have had in the past more autonomy around making decisions around technology, all of a sudden, as soon as you mention AI is a red flag word. And what I mean by that is not a red flag in that it's bad. It's that anytime now the term AI comes up within a company, all of a sudden, oh, wait, anything AI related needs to go through an AI steerco at the top, right? Or it needs to go through the CTO's office, or it needs to go through IT because they are thinking about a more broader strategy around the application of AI than for service. And now this is where obviously it gets tricky, right? Because with how nascent the entire market is around leveraging AI in a lot of these different scenarios, service, unfortunately, a lot of the times for a lot of organizations tends to be a little bit lower on the pecking order when it comes to getting the most innovative technology because especially in cases where service is a cost center, that has an impact versus applying AI in growth areas, right, within the organization or inside of their products that are being manufactured if it's an OEM as an example, right? But what's happened now is that it's become much more of a technical strategy and a broader corporate strategy for organizations. So as for service leaders, what I would recommend is to have a good understanding of what that landscape looks like now when it comes to AI buying decisions and working with different folks internally, as long as partners that you are thinking about partnering up with, like ourselves, to really position yourself in a way that is complementary to that broader strategy, and not something that is, I guess you would say, competitive in that regard. And there are definitely a lot of different things that that can help drive that forward, because it's the I can tell you, as old as time, the friction between IT and business units has always been there. Now is a time where we need to figure out how to bridge that commonality together, because those decisions now are being made at a completely different level than they were 2 years ago across the board. So so that's kind of the way that we've been seeing the world as it's shifted towards becoming a CEO initiative, involves the CIO, and then it becomes a much broader horizontal discussion around the overall strategy of AI within an organization.
Yeah, indeed. And the one thing that stuck out from what you said is that the complexity and the potential that AI brings to the table, it requires for these two groups to be complementary to each other, and that means the traditional confrontation that we see happens because there's different priorities, and with AI, turns out you actually have to take into account all those different priorities. Otherwise, your security is going to be at risk, or the usability, the adoption is going to be at risk. The interoperability and the scale, the reach of that solution is not going to get to where you want it. So you actually want to incorporate the different perspectives and areas of expertise of these different personas. I think that is you're spot on. That's critical. I'll also point out your points of view are echoed by our listening audience. I left this while you were talking, but John Carroll, colleague here at Service Council and founder, I should say. Yeah, he's around. Calling out that critical interrelationship, right? That it's not an and, it's not an or, but it's an and relationship. And also there was this comment from Juan Cruz. Hey, good to see you, Juan. About this paradox of choice, that sometimes when we have too much, that leads to a lack of adoption. What the data has told us is there is excitement about the new, but it needs to make sense.
Yeah,
in my day to day, not new for the sake of new, not cool for the sake of cool. It actually needs to help in the day to day. And one of the data points that John's helping me pull in there, I'll leave that for the community as we transition to some of the examples that you were starting to introduce. One that we continue to see year after year is what happens when the technicians get stuck in the field and they need help. There's been a lot of investment on the data foundation, and still the number one go-to action that we see in the survey is calling a colleague.
Yeah,
that takes time away from your more senior technicians, the experts. It's hard to scale. It creates friction when you're thinking about talent retention and all, and that is at best. At worst, you start losing governance because everybody has their own style and solution, and that intelligence is not elevated. That variety could impact the customer experience. So very open problem. Can you share how is it that you feel AI is or could be transforming this process and influencing the bandwidth and the performance of talent?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I do think this is an example of what I mean when it comes. It's it's not just about a fancy new app. It's actually thinking about how do we kind of meet users where they are in that experience, right? So if you think about it, we're all creatures of habit, right? So in order, when I have a problem, I have a go-to person that I typically call to brainstorm and to try to solve a problem with, as an example, right? Like, even if I have another app that all of a sudden can give me answers, or ChatGPT is now available, my inclination is still to go and make that call, like you were saying earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of trying to get people to use something else, why don't we try to mimic that exact same behavioral pattern of getting them to call, but instead they'll call an AI, right? The AI will sound just like another human being, and you can then just start having a conversation with it, right? Having a conversation, it helps you answer a couple of questions. It has all the latest information. And then let's say at a certain point that AI doesn't know an answer to a problem. Well, that's not a problem because then the AI will recognize that and then bring in that expert as an example, right? That expert will then, provide that additional assistance or response to that situation. But the most valuable thing out of that, and I do think this is one of the hidden troughs of real great information that just doesn't exist within organizations' data structures, is these calls that exist between technicians, right? But now all of a sudden, if you have an AI that's able to help you kind of solve this first level of problem, and then it brings in an expert when needed, it also can listen in on that expert conversation, understand whether it solved the problem, and then the AI then incorporates that into its own ability to respond. So the next time someone calls for the exact same problem, it doesn't have to forward it to expert technician, right? And it's able to give the response in line. And so the idea around how AI can transform these things is really more about, and as John alluded to, as well as what we were talking about before, is how do I actually just slide myself into the way that a person normally behaves, rather than trying to get them and teach them how to use something that they've never used before. I mean, as easy as it possibly could be, still people in the field like to call other people, right? So if I can just say, hey, instead of calling a person, why don't you call the AI again, who sounds like it's funny because we have in our functionality, we have a list of different cadences, accents, people, but those types of things matter, right? For a lot of folks to feel comfortable with this kind of stuff. And then actually having this kind of a conversational approach that still gives you the best of both worlds. You'll get the answers that you need, and then you're able to shift a lot of those basic calls away from your best people so that they can stay focused on work. And then when they answer it, that's not just an interaction that only exists for them now. It's an interaction that can then be disseminated to everyone else, right? And so that is an example of what I mean, where technology and AI is at a point that can really just reimagine the way we interact with technology, not just bringing new capabilities in the way that we think about it today, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
It does make a lot of sense. The one thing that I would disagree with is that we have different accents. I've never heard anything of the sort. I don't know what you're talking about.
Totally fair. I'll concede to that for sure. So
for the audience that doesn't know my full background, and if it doesn't already give it away, I'm originally from Mexico. So there you have it. That's your fun fact of the day. But yeah, very interesting. And there's another use case, as we were talking about the confrontational areas within the organization. We talked at the strategic level, but one that happens at the technician level is the relationship with with sales, especially. And over there, just to share a couple of the data points motivating this, 1 in 3 technicians in this year's survey does not agree that their company make it easy for them to record net new opportunities for the customer. So they're the ones in front of it, and it's not easy to capture that. 42% only think that they have the right resources to innovate. So they're encouraged to innovate, but do you have enough time and are the processes in place to communicate those ideas for innovation? Up the chain, less than half. So how do you anticipate the applied intelligence between the frontline and sales to evolve with the adoption of AI to change some of these dynamics?
Yeah, it's a great point. And quite honestly, I think we've been talking about this sales and service like relationship and growth opportunities and a lot of these things for a better part of the last decade now. And it's always interesting to see and hear kind of different approaches and ways that companies are trying to leverage this. But again, if you think about AI as not so much about delivering intelligence to a situation, more so than just making it a lot easier to record these things and then take care of all the back end work that in order for it to fit into a business process or into your data structure that you need. So I'll give you an example, right? An example of it might be something like this. A technician goes on site and then they're having a conversation with the customer. And in that conversation, they identify, hey, these guys might actually be in the market for another asset, machine upgrade, you name it, right? Now, typically what has to happen at that point is that the technician is still doing their work. They close out their work order. They may have some kind of a workflow to log a new opportunity, or they maybe just have to text the sales guy. And again, that's not systematic. It's just very ad hoc, right? And so you're not given necessarily the tools or the ease and ability to create these things. Well, AI has this amazing ability to, for example, and part of this is my own personal vision of where I see the future going, is I want to be able to execute my entire day as a field service technician without having to pick up my phone or my laptop once. So what do I mean by that? So when someone comes in and says, and you identify an opportunity, you say, hey, you tell the AI, hey, I just talked to this guy, had an opportunity, just want to log in and make sure we can get the right people on it. The AI can take that conversation, understand what you're trying to do, create the opportunity inside of your CRM or whatever it is, maybe even send a text message out to the relevant salesperson that's involved with that without burdening the technician with some kind of a process where they have to fill out a form or they have to do something else in a different system or anything like that. For me, this is where the concept of applied intelligence to improve the frontline experience comes into play. And that's where I'm thinking about, okay, well, can I fill out my timesheets that way? Can I complete my work orders that way? Why do I need to use my phone for all of that? Maybe I can just speak to something or, record something via voice and just say I'm done. And then all of a sudden, all the fancy stuff happens on the back end of that, right? And that's kind of where I see a reduction in a lot of that friction, and where AI can definitely help in driving those types of moments that apply to different folks and bring the right pieces in, and also make sure that information flows to the right people going out as well. So so that's kind of my thought process and my take on it.
Yeah, it's great, and it's really about how can AI identify and take away from the dislikes, the mundane activities, and at the same time that it doesn't take away the fun out of it, right? And this distinction seems simple, but it's not. And the truth is, the definition even changes from one organization to the other of what these two things mean. That's one of the reasons why I'll comment our members benefit from that participation in the Voice of the Field Service Engineer, to understand how is it that their own frontline feels, both the good and the bad and the ugly, and how does that compare against the baseline. So my little promo for anybody that's interested in getting this type of knowledge about what are the problems worth solving, reach out to me. Happy to have a follow-up on how you can participate in the survey this year. And bringing this back, one final question for you, Edwin, a little bit of a crystal ball situation. But if we extract and elevate ourselves back to the frontline experience, again, we've been talking a lot about these micro moments and why they're important, how they can help. But it turns out that the frontline experience appears to still be a second-tier priority among service leaders. It's important, but not as important as customer experience and business. It's the one where most service leaders miss their targets in 2024, and it's the one where the smallest proportion of leaders are expecting to focus during 2025. So the question for you is, do you see this changing, and especially from where you sit within this whole ecosystem? Do you think it will influence the way in which software is perceived and defined in the years to come?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a couple of major forces that are happening here today in the market around this. The first is I think everyone resonates with the thought and the idea that, implementing these kinds of technologies to go through this kind of a transformation within an organization really requires some level of understanding of how to impact and create value, right? And measure value around that. What I will say is for us, and what we've learned, through my time here as well, is that it actually should be flipped. The employee experience should be first, because there's no way you're going to create an impact without your employees changing the habits that they have to engage with these types of tools to see the net benefit that you want to see, right? And that then, of course, then trickles down into the customer experience. So, and I can speak firsthand to the fact that a lot of that kind of change management, a lot of that focus on that frontline experience is so critical to realizing a lot of the promises and the outcomes that people are promising around AI, as an example, right? Now, that doesn't just come with needing to invest more in it. That's the kind of the interesting thing about this. There is also this massive and rapid acceleration and innovation of how software is built and delivered in a way that allows us as people to be more productive, and companies like Aquant to be more productive in focusing in on everything, including the employee experience, right? And understanding now that the ability of how we're able to deliver like custom experiences, custom agents to address all the micro moments that will then all get stitched up into a frontline experience where someone can easily execute multiple actions, multiple transactions in 5 different systems, all from a single place. That is what the beauty of the promise of what AI is also bringing to the forefront as well. So I see the entire market around how software is delivered to focus much more closely on that frontline experience, because honestly, without their buy-in and without our users loving what they're using to help them do their job and feel fulfilled in what they do, you're really not going to see any of the impact that you want to see in your organization as a whole. And we are in a very human-centric part of an organization. Service is still very human-centric as much as you want to incorporate AI into it, right? So that's kind of the way I see what the future holds for us. It's very exciting and it's very interesting and sometimes scary, quite honestly, but it's but there is a lot of excitement around what we can deliver now in this next generation kind of an experience for frontline workers.
Yeah, I love it. I wholeheartedly agree. This year's theme is harnessing humanity and technology for that next level service. And I personally believe that frontline experience is a leading indicator to customer experience, which should be a leading indicator for the business experience. And if we get that sequence wrong, it's going to be very hard to sustain our efforts. Edwin, this has been such a good conversation. You've shared so much that it would be a shame if I let you go without learning a little bit more about you, the individual. We've talked about that human being at the center of service. Do you mind sharing some passion of yours outside of work or some project that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I love what I do, to the point where a lot of my passion projects still sit around things like technology. And one of the things that I've been working on lately is really leveraging AI to figure out actually how to build my own software apps for my own personal productivity and use. And so dabbling in a lot of things like vibe coding and a lot of this kind of stuff has been a real obsession of mine as of recently. So, because it's unbelievable. I have a friend of mine who recently picked up a couple of AI tools and built his own iOS app. He has no business building an iOS app, like literally no business. Like he does not come from a computer science background, coding background, but he's able to do it now, right? And it kind of describes some of the fascinating potential that's out there. So it's definitely one of the things that it's not as interesting as it sounds, I'm sure, to most people, but for me, it's definitely one of those things that I've been sinking my teeth into as of recently. So yeah.
Hey, your job is to help others. I don't think there's anything wrong with helping yourself.
Yep, absolutely.
So I think that's great. To our listening audience, again, thank you for joining us. This has been Edwin Pahk, Senior Vice President of Customer Success at Aquant. Today's podcast was recorded. You can go and visit it on our website, on our LinkedIn page, and hope to see you next week, 2 weeks from now, as we continue our series. Have a great rest of the day. See you soon.